So thank you, everyone. The time's now 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome to the Mad River Valley Virtual Modern Wood Heat event that we're having tonight. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to attend. People might still trickle in, got a few more RSVPs, but we're going to see. We'll just get started here. So my name's Zachary Maya. I'm an assistant planner at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. For those that might not know, we provide our member municipalities with assistance in providing effective local governance. This past year, part of that support, thanks to Efficiency Vermont, has been through providing informational events on energy efficiency, weatherization, and other support in that field. So we're very pleased that we're able to put on this sort of programming for all of you. Also just want to recognize that this event has been put on in coordination with the Mad River Valley Planning District. Joshua Schwartz, Executive Director, and Katie Gallagher, Community Planner, are here with us tonight. They're a great resource for Fayston, Waitsfield, and Warren, so very pleased to have you here, and thank you for the assistance in coordinating this. So with that being said, tonight's event, we're going to have a real quick agenda, going for an hour in length. So we're going to start off with some brief introductions. Then we're going to turn it over to Emma Hansen, the Wood Energy Coordinator at the Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. And she's going to give us a 30-minute presentation. And then after that, in the final 25 minutes, we will go into a discussion, a question and answer session. So please hold any comments or questions that you might have until the end. I do want to set a few quick ground rules just so everyone's on the same page. Everyone's doing a great job of this right now, but as we go along, please remember to stay muted throughout the presentation. And when you're not speaking, it's just going to help us all make sure that we're not talking over each other. We don't have an annoying background noise. So that would be great. Again, please hold questions until the end of the presentation. If you are using the online interface, please feel free to use the chat. That's a great way to have a question for later and put it up there so you don't forget. And then just want to recognize again that the meeting is being recorded. So this will hopefully be produced after the fact by the Mad River Valley TV, so we can distribute this to any friends or family you might want to convert to a new wood stove. With that being said, just want to go ahead and dive into introductions. We can't go around the virtual room, so I'm just going to call on folks. Just looking to have your name and maybe where you're calling in or participating from. So first of all, I'll start off. I'm Zach Maya, planner at CVRPC, and I'm calling in from Richmond. Grace?
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm a planner at CVRPC. I'm calling in from Essex.
Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm the main event this evening, so you'll hear more about me in a second. And I'm calling in from Fayston.
Thanks. Stephen?
Hi, I'm Stephen with Cassie. I'm calling in from Warren.
Thanks, Stephen and Cassie. Looks like we have Dwight.
Yes, I'm Dwight, and I'm calling in from Burlington.
Thanks, Dwight. Joshua?
Hi all, Josh Schwartz. I work at the Mad River Valley Planning District, as Zach said before, and I'm calling in from Waitsfield.
Yeah. Josh? Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Gallagher. I am the community planner with the Mad River Valley Planning District, and I am calling in from Waterbury.
Thanks, Katie. Bob? Bob, you might be muted. All right, maybe we'll circle back. Annie?
Hey there, this is Annie Decker Della Sola. I work as the Town of Waitsfield Planning and Zoning Administrator, and I'm calling in from Montpelier.
Thanks, Annie. Anne Marie?
Hi, I'm Anne Marie from the Waitsfield Planning Commission, and I'm calling from Waitsfield.
Thanks, Anne Marie. Alice?
Alice Peel, Waitsfield Planning Commission, and I'm calling in from Waitsfield.
Thanks, Alice. Kevin?
Hi, this is Kevin Anderson, also of the Waitsfield Planning Commission, calling in from Waitsfield.
Thanks, Kevin. Brad?
Hi, this is Brad Long. I'm with Efficiency Vermont, and I'm calling in from Waitsfield.
Thanks, Brad. Looks like we have someone on the phone. Could that person introduce themselves?
Yeah, hey, my name is Beth Cole, and I'm just a homeowner here in Waitsfield. Interested in what you guys are going to discuss.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate it. And yeah, sounds good. I think we're all good to go then. So without further ado, I guess I'll go ahead and turn it over to the main event this evening. Pleased to introduce Emma Hansen, the Wood Energy Coordinator for the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. Emma's work really centers around one great goal in the Vermont Comprehensive Energy Plan 2016, which was to double the state's double wood fuel share building heating by 2035. So ambitious for sure. This is a goal that's going to touch on decreasing state reliance on heating oil, as well as increasing local conservation efforts for private forested land to meet the demand. We're excited. I know that I'm excited to hear from the expert in the room on this topic tonight, and I hope that you are too. So now going to turn it over to Emma.
Great, thanks all. Thank you for having me and putting this on. I've been in this job for 3.5 years, and I've never actually done one in my town before, so I'm a little sad that this is happening when we can't all be together. But if I don't know you in the real world, feel free to say hi in neurons. I'm that person that's identifiable, even with masks, because my very curly shoulder length hair. So feel free to stop me and say hello. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Good. And good. Okay, great. So I am going to try to cover
Emma, just
a lot of content in a pretty short.
Don't want to interrupt you, but it looks like we're getting the presenter view. So we might not want to see your notes.
Do you quickly know how to fix that? Display setting. Oh, there we go. How's that?
Oh, yep, looking good. There you go.
Good. All right, awesome. My notes aren't that interesting, but this is better for you anyway. Okay, great. So let's get started. As we said, I am the Wood Energy Coordinator at the Department of Forest, Parks, and Rec. And it's fair to ask what that means, because I'm pretty sure I'm the only one in the country. So my job entails a lot of this, especially in non-COVID times. I give a lot of talks to small energy-related groups like this, talking about wood heat. I coordinate sort of the many diffuse people related to this field in the state to try to push us in a coordinated direction. And I do a lot of education work as well, letting people know what wood heat is these days and how they can best utilize it in their homes and businesses. And this is my dog Maggie in front of our wood stove, which is in that room right there. So what is advanced wood heat? So when we are talking about advanced wood heat, I think we've got to start here, because humans have been heating with wood more or less forever, give or take 5 years. But we've only just gotten really good at it in about the past 30. So when we talk about advanced wood heat, we're talking about really highly efficient wood burning devices. And that could include things from EPA certified wood stoves on the small end, all the way up to super efficient automated wood chip boilers on the very large end. So everything in between. Now, automated wood heat is advanced wood heat that can be programmed with a thermostat. So all automated wood heat is advanced, but not all advanced wood heat is automated. Now, the next question that people usually ask me is why Forest, Parks, and Rec has skin in the game of burning wood, because that may not be obvious if you're not super familiar with forest economics. And the reason is that it's about forest health. So Vermont is 76% forested, which is incredibly impressive. We're the second most forested state in the country. And 80% of that forest is privately owned. That's important. So right now we are harvesting less than half the net growth in the forest, which is great. So there's very little concern for us over harvesting because that is so not happening. And the markets for low-grade wood are evolving. I'm going to pause here real quick to do a quick explanation between the differences of high and low-grade wood, if you're not familiar. So when you perform a sustainable forest management plan, there are two kinds of wood that come out of the forest. There's high-grade wood, and that's wood that is going to end up in a sawmill. So that's wood that will one day become a floorboard or a cabinet or a 2x4, something to that end. And then there's low-grade wood. So low-grade wood is wood that is diseased or has kinks or is a species that can be used by a carpenter. It's everything else, and low-grade wood is about 70 to 80% of a harvest. So low-grade wood becomes firewood, it becomes wood chips, it becomes paper. And in our region in particular, paper has been a huge industry in the Northeast until the digital age. And so there's less paper being used. Low-grade wood markets are evolving, but it's absolutely essential to have healthy markets for both kinds of wood out of a harvest. Otherwise, you can't do it. And that's when we start to see things like this. And we start to see the highest and best use of that forest being owned by a private landowner maybe becoming development rather than keeping it intact, which is where we as forest parks are not concerned, because we like to see those large tracts of forest stay intact for the habitat services, the carbon sequestration and storage, the water filtration, the recreation, all of it. So it is possibly counterintuitive, but in fact, burning wood in your wood stove actually helps to keep forests as forests. So we're going to see the forest through the individual trees here in this picture. Wood heat also supports our local economy. So when Vermonters heat with fossil fuels, 78 cents of every fuel dollar leaves the state. So if you heat your own home with propane or oil, you can do a quick calculation of how much money you spent last year. 78 cents of that left Vermont. Whereas when we heat with wood fuels, the inverse of that is true. So more money stays in state, which supports local jobs and our local economy, as well as keeping those forests as forests. Now, as Zach alluded to, we have a couple of really big goals in the state related to wood heat. There's the one that most people have heard of, I think. If you showed up to this presentation, you're probably familiar with the state's goal of getting to 90% renewable energy by the year 2050. But then we have this other goal within that goal, which is getting to 35% of our thermal energy needs alone from wood heat by the year 2030. It's important to note sometimes the words energy and electricity get used interchangeably, but that is not the case. So there's energy, and then within energy, you have electric, transportation, and thermal. As a cold rural place, those thermal and transportation chunks are quite large. And while we're doing really well at getting our electric grid to being really quite renewable, we're way behind in the thermal and transportation front. So this wood heat part is really important, and it's our locally homegrown sustainable fuel literally in our backyards. So why 35%? So that 35%, I think sometimes people think that we just pulled it out of thin air because it sounds like, I don't know, kind of doable, but it's actually based on the 2010 Vermont Wood Fuel Supply Study. So we commissioned a study to see how much low-grade wood growth, so not even low-grade wood, but the growth on that low-grade wood there was in Vermont forests, what kind of a goal we could set without compromising forest health, and then let's be really conservative about that. And the number that we arrived at was 35%. Now, since then, we actually redid this study last year, and we found that there's even more low-grade wood growth in the forest now than there was when we did it the first time, so we could have set a higher goal. But 35% is still good. Now, if we do reach that goal, we'll displace 40 million gallons of fossil fuel every year, and we estimate that Vermonters will save $120 million a year on their heating bills. So where are we now? Vermonters get 23% of our thermal energy needs from wood. You might be saying 23 sounds pretty close to 35 in terms of reaching renewable energy goals. That one sounds like a slam dunk, Emma, except that we've been at 21 for a really long time, and we've made some progress in the past couple of years, but that final 12 percentage point gap is really good, the challenge ahead of us. 43% of Vermonters heat in full or in part with wood, and Vermont is really a leader in wood heat, to be sure. More households identify wood as their primary heat source than any other state, including Maine, which doesn't make sense because they have even more trees than we do, but we are leading. And a third of Vermont students attend a school heated with wood, which is amazing. So what does getting to 35% look like? Well, it could look like any number of things, but in one scenario, we decided, sort of within reason, what could this look like? Just visualize it. And it could look like adding about another 40,000 pellet stoves, another 10,000 residential pellet boilers, 2,500 commercial pellet boilers, and a couple hundred commercial chip boilers. And we'll talk more about what those are and how they work here in a second. So I'm going to do a high-level overview of the three main wood fuel types and the devices that they can be burned in. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. But we're going to do a high-level overview of everything so you guys know all about wood heat at the end of this. So the one we are all the most familiar with is cordwood. So cordwood being, or a cord of wood being a 4x4x8 stacked pile of split wood. Fun fact, so named a cord of wood because in the ye old days they measured it with an actual cord to make sure you were getting what you were supposed to be getting. Pros of cordwood is that you can DIY it literally out of your backyard, super affordable. Cons, so much room for user error, both in the fuel itself, if you burn it before it's totally dry, or your stove, if you let it smolder. There's all sorts of ways to not do cordwood quite right. Lots of pros, but we do have to consider those cons as well. So when we're talking about meeting goals and adding to wood heat, these are the kinds of things we want to see retired. This stove, not this exact picture, but this literal stove was in my in-laws' house up until about 1.5 years ago. I finally talked them into getting a new one. Their life has been changed. The one in the middle, you can't even be mad because that's so creative, but we don't want to add any more of those either. And then outdoor wood boilers, in the right context for the right person, they serve a very useful purpose. But I just want to be very clear that we're not looking to add more of those in order to meet these goals that we're talking about. But we are talking about things that look like this. So we're talking about EPA certified wood stoves that burn really efficiently, really cleanly, and indoor wood boilers that are honestly kind of amazing with the kind of technology that they use. Quick note on the fireplace. So if someone asks you if you heat with wood and you say, yes, I have a fireplace, you have answered the question incorrectly. And that's okay because we're going to talk about it right now. So fireplaces are not a heating appliances. They're decorative and super cozy, but they suck warm air out of your house and they create 30 times more pollution than a wood stove. And wood stoves will provide you with 3 times the amount of heat with 1/3 the amount of wood. So we're going to say no to the fireplace and yes to the fireplace insert. So if you saw that slide and you had this oh no thought, it can be fixed, so don't worry. You can get either a cordwood insert or a wood pellet insert. Close up your decorative hole in your house and replace it with a heating appliance and you're good to go. So moving on to wood pellets. So wood pellets are made of 100% compressed sawdust. They burn super clean and they look kind of like rabbit food, right? They're really small. They're actually made with some of the same equipment. And because they're small and evenly shaped and of even dryness, they can function in many ways like a liquid fuel because they can move through equipment easily and they can be easily programmed and dialed into equipment. And they're available both in bags, like you see this little fellow helping stack here, and in bulk delivery format. And they can be burned either in pellet stoves, which in many ways look and function like a wood stove in that they are space heaters, right? They sit in the corner of your living room and look nice. But they require quite a bit less effort than a wood stove. I have a wood stove, so I can affectionately say that I refer to it as my infant, right? Like it needs attention every couple of hours, whereas a pellet stove is more like a teenager. You can leave it home all day, all night, it'll be fine, right? You load it up, you turn the thermostat, you can walk away for 12 to 72 hours, depending on the size of your hopper, and it'll run happily on its own. So this is a great option for folks that really want to get away from heating with fossil fuels, but maybe aren't ready to switch to something more significant in their house, but can easily program and get off, 80% of the fossil fuel needs that they currently have in their home by adding a pellet stove. Because the other option for heating with pellets is a pellet boiler or furnace. Now, this is exactly like heating with propane or oil, and that, I'll just skip to next slide. It's exactly like heating with what you have right because, right, so in this visualization, you can see that a truck will arrive at your house. They will deliver fuel to a storage area. You program a thermostat. The fuel is called to your boiler or furnace, and then your house is warmed. So that all sounds super familiar because it's exactly the same except with wood pellets instead of oil or propane. If you are looking at this picture and thinking, well, shoot, I guess I can't do this because I don't have a pellet storage room in my house, Emma, it's okay. This picture is from Austria, where there is actually such a thing as a pellet storage room in a house. We have other solutions. Depending on your house setup, you might end up with a very large standing bag in your basement, might be made out of plywood in your basement, or we can put something outside too if you either don't have a basement or don't have room in your basement. So I have yet to see a scenario where there's not a way to work this out. I would be remiss, given that this is a matter of value presentation, not to mention that our town offices in Facein are heated with pellets, which is fan-freaking-tastic. So this slide is a little bit old, so our total savings will actually be higher now. But this, they installed in 2009. Dave Frank of Sunwood Biomass put this in, and I'm personally thrilled that I get to go around to presentations and tell people that in my town we heat with pellets at the town office, and Facein as a town has realized tens of thousands of dollars in savings, as well as displacing fossil fuels while we're at it. So wood chips I'll touch on just briefly because they are not related to residential use at all, but just so you're familiar with the third fuel. So wood chips are the simplest wood fuel because it is quite literally a tree into a chipper to its final destination, and that is the whole story. So that would be called a green wood chip, and it is a very affordable fuel. And they make sense in very large buildings. So this is outside the National Life Building where my office is in normal times. They're also common in schools, hospitals, college campuses, that sort of thing. And they make loads of sense in large scale installations where they can be really, really affordable. They do not scale down well, however, and if anyone has questions about why, we can come back to that later. So at this point, you're probably wondering, that sounds awesome. Am I going to save money if I do this? And the answer is yes, but I can't tell you exactly when, because how much money you save depends on the price of oil, which fluctuates wildly, which is honestly one of the reasons to switch to wood. So your total ROI is going to vary depending on the current price of oil and what current available incentives you're able to take advantage of. So this is one of my favorite slides, and one upside to doing Zoom style presentations now is that people can actually read it, which is nice. So you can see this compares on an MMBTU basis. So all these have been normalized so you can compare them to each other. That electric resistance at the top is being your most expensive heating option. And then this orange and blue one that are sort of vacillating wildly, that's oil and propane. So sometimes they're super cheap, Sometimes they're super expensive, but they're definitely always unpredictable. And then down at the bottom, you can see wood fuel sort of happily chugging along with the price of inflation, as well as natural gas, very cheap, but we don't have that here in the valley or in most of Vermont. And cold climate heat pumps, which are electric heat, but because they use it so much more efficiently, they're down there as well. And they've been broken out from electric resistance heating. So it's important that we talk about PM emissions. Especially historically, before we got really good at wood heating, was a legitimate concern about wood heating. So PM emissions is particulate matter, and particulate matter under 2.5 parts pounds. So this is one of those things I only ever say the shorthand for and never the full one. It's very hard to say the full version. But wood burning produces emissions of fine particulate matter, which is harmful to human health. But we've gotten so much better at it with modern appliances, and I'm going to show you a comparison here in a second. But it is very much worthwhile to consider changing out old wood stoves and boilers, because they can be a significant source of PM emissions, and we want to be very cognizant of that as we look to expand wood heating. And for large installations, there's very sophisticated equipment that can filter PM emissions out of the stack. So to compare, on the far right here, you can see how many PM emissions you would get out of a non-certified wood stove, so pre-1990 wood stove or an outdoor wood boiler. And then that drops by 70% when you just switch to an EPA certified wood stove, even more so for a pellet stove. And pellet boilers, so this full automated systems we talked about, are basically on parity with propane and oil in terms of PM at the source where it's burnt. And this is very interesting, and I think worth pointing out, which is that PM emissions by source. So residential users, if we're looking at the circle on the left, residential users use 52% of all of the wood fuel that is used in Vermont. 52% of it are residential users. But residential users create 95% of the PM emissions. Let's unpack that for a hot second. So one, that tells us that the biomass electric places and the large scale commercial places burning wood are doing a great job. Those places have permits from the Department of Air Quality. They have staff that are running those really cleanly and efficiently. They're doing a really good job. And if you hear about a large installation potentially going in here, you should not be concerned. The second thing that tells us is that us as residential users really need to get our act together, because this is crazy. So what you're seeing here is 1, people burning wood that's not entirely dry, 2, burning it in old appliances, or 3, not using those appliances properly. So it's really important to burn dry wood. If you burn wet wood, what's really happening is that instead of the BTUs coming out of that wood going into warming your house, they're just going into each other in order to evaporate the water out of the log so that they can actually ignite. So you're literally wasting energy drying out the logs instead of warming your home. It also produces creosote, which lines your chimneys and can result in chimney fires, which is a very real concern. And it produces more pollution both in and outside of your home. So if you walk outside your house, or if you're just driving down 17 or 100 in winter, and you see smoke coming out of someone's chimney, smoke is quite simply unburnt fuel. So what you're seeing is fuel that could have been used just going up into the air in the form of pollution, where if you drive past a house that has a clean burning stove that's being used well, there will be no smoke whatsoever. So there might be a little bit of smoke right at startup, a little bit of shutdown before it hits full efficiency stage. But in that main height of burning, you might see a little bit of water vapor coming out of the stack, and that's it. So while the smoke coming out of chimneys this time of year is super cute for most people, for me, I have to resist the urge to knock on the door and ask to help, because there's something not quite right happening, and I would like to help you figure out what it is. So, and just to compare, so when we think about adding all those pellet boilers and pellet stoves that I talked about earlier, we don't want to increase PM emissions, of course. So this is why change-up programs are really helpful, because for every non-EPA certified wood stove that we remove, we clear enough PM emissions out of the air to put in 200 pellet boilers, just by comparison. So we've already taken out so many pellet or wood stoves this year that we've got room for many thousands more pellet boilers to go in and still have a net reduction in PM emissions across the state. Okay, how am I doing on time? I'm doing great. Okay. All right, so let's talk about greenhouse gas emissions. So this is, before people's main concern was the PM emissions. Now what I hear from people most about is carbon emissions, which is totally fair. And I think they're both really important discussions. So the first thing I like to explain to people is that a tree is a carbon battery, right? And then when the tree reaches its end of life, it is going to release however much carbon it has stored in it, no matter what ends up happening to that tree. So it's important to realize that a tree that falls on the forest floor, regardless of whether or not someone hurt it, is going to release the same amount of carbon as it would if it was burned in a stove. So that is the case. And then the other thing is that with very much possible and planned for now, and I can refer you to materials if anyone's a landowner that's curious about how to do this or strategies to manage both for timber and carbon storage and sequestration all on the same forest parcel, because this is definitely a yes and situation as we work to displace oil and sequester and store carbon. So we work to achieve a lot of goals all at the same time. The much, much, much greater risk is that we start losing forest land permanently to development. It's way more important that we keep forest land intact so that it can continue to sequester and store carbon and all those other habitat and wildlife and environmental services they provide us. So when you're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, it's sometimes easy to lose track of the trees and the rest. The forest is more important. We need to keep those forest blocks. And the other thing to think about is that, so trees are part of what we call the biogenic carbon cycle, and that, there's sort of carbon circling up here in the atmosphere. And if we had never figured out fossil fuels, we wouldn't have a problem, right? Because the fossil fuels were sort of safely tucked away as carbon deep in the earth, and then we introduced them into the atmosphere. And so we've broken the balance of the cycle. Whereas trees, sort of were perfectly moving in this lovely little symbiotic circle of absorbing carbon, creating carbon, absorbing carbon, creating carbon. And now we're asking a lot of them because we're also asking them to solve the problem of geologic carbon, which we've introduced to the equation. And this is a really great publication called Forest Carbon that came out last year as a collaboration between UMass Amherst and UVM, written for landowners, so not necessarily forester geek types. I am not a forester, so I really appreciated how this was written. And just more than anything else, the single most important thing we can do is to keep forests as forests, full stop. All right, so let's talk about some next steps. I've totally sold you on wood heat. Now, what should we do about it? One, well, this is Dave Frank, hometown hero of Sunwood Biomass and based out of Waitsfield. This is at an installation at Artisan Coffee in Waterbury. If you have ever driven past that place and seen the big coffee silo up front, that's actually full of wood pellets, not coffee. So if you're looking at get your new stove, go to a stove shop. You want to talk to a professional, walk in, make sure you fully understand, and they are the pros. They know everything that's going to work best about your specific setup. Strongly advise against buying any kind of stove from a big box store. You will get what you pay for, and you will not get the expertise. For a pellet boiler, you want to talk to an installer. So you can find a list of the pros at efficiencyvermont.com. You get a few different estimates, 2, 3. And then for large scale, so if you have some connection to, a hospital or school that's interested, you'll likely want to start with the feasibility study. If that's the case, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to set you up with a couple of folks. So current incentives. So right now, if you were to buy a new automated pellet boiler, you'd be looking at $6,000 in total incentives for everyone. If there's any WEC members on this call, they are eligible for an additional $1,000. And then for commercial projects over 5,000 square feet, looking at $125 a square foot up to 50 grand in rebates. They are also currently sales tax exempt. And stoves, right now the rebate is up to $600, and that's through Efficiency Vermont at point of purchase. There's also a federal tax credit available for those. And again, if you are a Washington Electric member, or if you know someone at one of these other utilities, there's an additional rebate available as well. There's financing available as low as 0% through the Heat Saver Loan, which is a program jointly through VSECU and Efficiency Vermont. So you can get a Heat Saver Loan for a pellet stove even, and then we're talking like $20 a month to be able to get into some renewable heating in your home very, very affordably to displace the vast majority of the fossil fuels in your house. And then as far as what these cost, so a pellet boiler fully installed is going to run you about $18,000 to $20,000. A pellet stove installed $3,000 to $4,000. Wood stove, assuming you have a chimney, is $2,000 to $3,000. I didn't mention this earlier, so that is one point of differentiation between a pellet stove and a wood stove. Is a pellet stove can be direct vented through an exterior wall, so you don't need a chimney for a pellet stove, which does make it cheaper and easier to install if you don't already have that infrastructure in your house. Wood chip boilers cost a shocking amount of money, but it still works out because the fuel is so affordable in the right installation. So you can feel great about heating with wood because it's going to keep your energy dollars here in Vermont, displace fossil fuels, support jobs for your neighbors, keep forests forest, most importantly, and you might even save some money. All right, any questions? That was a lot, so feel free to ask me and go back to something.
Thank you so much, Emma. Yeah, so does anyone have any burning questions off the top of their head?
I see what you did there.
Thanks.
Sure, I've got one. This is Kevin. It was a great presentation. I enjoyed it very much. Can you talk a little bit about the source of pellets? Like, I like the idea. I don't heat with a pellet stove. I like the idea of, supporting the local state forest economy, but, how likely is it that I would get pellets from a Vermont or even Valley forest?
Yeah, Valley would be, I'm going to say, unlikely for pellets. Right at the moment, we have one wood pellet mill in Vermont. There were two. We're hoping to have two again in the not so distant future. But right now there's one, and that is Vermont Wood Pellet in Clarendon, so down by Rutland. And they source all of their wood from within about a 60-mile radius of their plant. So I guess that could be the Valley. I'm not actually sure in miles how far Clarendon is from here. So there, and Bournes delivers Vermont Wood Pellets here in the Valley. So you can definitely for sure get access to them. Vermont Wood Pellet doesn't make enough to cover all of the pellet demands in the state, and that's okay, because there are also lots of very high quality pellets being manufactured in New York, Maine, and New Hampshire, and plenty of Vermont trees cross the river to become pellets and then come back again. And really the forest economy has always been a regional one, so it's a bit of a raise all ships situation in terms of improving that low-grade wood market. So as long as you're buying them from the Northern Forest region, you can feel good about it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Emma? I wasn't sure, Alice, if you were raising your hand. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, well, talking about chips, I also noticed there are compressed blocks or that seemed to be a bridge towards split native wood. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, those are fun. It's kind of a niche product, but you're right. Those bricks are basically giant pellets, and you can burn them in your wood stove. Yeah, I mean, they're a good product. I don't know of any that are made in Vermont, but again, I think they're made sort of regionally. And that can be a really nice complement to go with your cordwood because they burn super hot, super fast, which is a nice shoulder season option too. When you're not necessarily looking for that all day fire, you just want to take the chill off. Yeah, those are a nice product. And because they're so clean, they are really easy to store in a garage or indoors, like cordwood that can, leave a lot of detritus everywhere. So, yeah, nice product, but not really a huge market.
Thanks.
Hmm?
Any other questions? Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, Emma, I have a question. So has COVID impacted, since I'm an emergency management planner, I guess I was thinking about whether COVID has impacted the wood heat landscape. Like, are more people buying wood systems since more people are at home?
That's a good question. I think that wood stove sales are up, sort of all year they've been up. And that's just sort of two parts. One, tracking with people spending money on their homes this year. They're not going on vacation. A lot of people spent money on home improvement. Two, it really fits in with that like prepper mentality we all went through in the spring when everyone was ordering toilet paper and like getting enough canned goods to last 3 months. And I go, what stove kind of goes with that? It's like same purchase. So it's sort of all of those things. Yes, I'd say wood stove and pellet stove sales are up, and pellet boiler sales are down just because it's an expensive purchase. And so this year it makes sense that those would be down a bit. But I do think that people are going to burn significantly more wood this year than they have in years past, simply because we're home. So, the 3 cords you might buy in a normal year might go real quick. So I would expect to see more midwinter cord purchases this year than usual.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Emma, I actually had a question along the same lines, but I think at an earlier point in the wood process. Have there been any impacts because of COVID? I know that I've heard rumors that hardwood prices for building have been up because of COVID. Has that had any impact on firewood? I know that it's a much larger percentage of what would be taken from a harvest, but are we seeing any of those cost impacts?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question. And I don't think I'm going to answer it the way you necessarily expect me to. So you're right that lumber prices are through the roof, like 2, 3, 4x what they normally are. But that is largely because of supply chain issues and not really demand. So that's simply because it's not available. Because especially in the spring, they weren't able to get it to the dealers. And firewood prices, I'd say, are tracking normal to up because there's a bit of demand. But then, back in the spring, people just couldn't work. Like back in the spring when the mills were closed, there was nowhere to send hardwood. And so therefore there was no reason to harvest low grade wood. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And the prices that you're seeing in lumber yards that are much higher don't really reflect low grade wood prices, which if anything are down.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Emma?
Okay, this time I am raising my hand. I'm trying to think of how to word this. I think you mentioned that, would you say most of the wood pellets or wood chips that are used in Vermont right now are not Vermont products? Do they come, are they?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what that breakdown is, but it would be impossible for it to be the majority. I would maybe half of pellets specifically are from Vermont. But like I was saying, that's not bad, because all of the pellets are from the northern forest region, so of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and we're really all on the same team. And then chips and cordwood are all very hyper local, simply because that is a volume based product. It doesn't make sense to move it more than 50 miles at the most. You start losing money real quick if you go drive any further. So all chip and cordwood is really very, very local.
So then my question is there any, like when we're talking about Act 171 and its wording that it's going to support the wood industry in Vermont, but also work to preserve forest blocks. The question becomes why isn't there more, or is there going to be an effort to increase wood pellet production in Vermont?
Certainly, we are very supportive of it. It's not an easy business, is I'd say the sort of oversimplified answer. It's a tricky business that with low margins, and they have to be sort of run by the right people in the right place, because many pellets, not all, but most are made out of sawdust residues. So they're often co-located with large sawmills. And we don't have that many very large sawmills in the state. We really only have a handful, but those are often the most obvious places to put them, because you keep up all the sawdust from the mill, put it into a pellet, and then you have a waste stream product. And that's the majority of pellets, but not all, but the majority. We only have a couple of those. And often when you already have a sawmill, are you then going to be able to get an air quality permit to also have a pellet mill there? And it's just not an easy game in terms of getting one set up between the margins and siting and permitting issues. But we're all very supportive of it and would love to see one. And plenty of folks are bending over backwards to try and make that happen.
It seems that to make that happen, those would be fairly large logging projects, logging industry, and then it would also be fairly large production and distribution. I mean, that becomes a whole new industry in Vermont. I just wonder about it because the logging industry itself is not fully regulated by the state. So, I wonder what tensions could be then created if Vermont does have a push towards a larger pellet production.
I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, because I think we could sort of go down a rabbit hole, but I would say it's important to think about the fact that there's no such thing as logging for low-grade wood, right? Low-grade wood is a byproduct of harvesting for high-grade wood, and you just have to deal with all the low-grade wood also. So there's no scenario where we would open up a pellet mill and people would be like, awesome, I'm going to get rich logging low-grade wood. That's simply not a thing, because there would be zero money in that. What would happen is that we continue to see losses for low-grade wood markets because of a paper mill closing, and a pellet mill could take the paper mill's place. in order to just sort of keep that demand equal. The question that I haven't been asked that I would like to be asked, I'm just going to answer anyway, is why someone should consider wood heat as opposed to or in addition to a cold climate heat pump, which is a great question. If you're thinking about your house or someone else's house and you are dedicated to getting off fossil fuels, what should you do? Cold climate heat pumps are awesome. I mean, they're great technology if your house is tight enough. So if your house, when the weather gets below -5, cold climate heat pumps don't work particularly well. But if you have a really tight house, so that's been weatherized or it's pretty new, honestly, that could work fine. But if you have sort of just like a normal house, let alone a drafty Vermont farmhouse, a heat pump will very likely struggle to keep up outside of the shoulder season, in which case wood heat is a much better option for you. Also, they were great as a symbiotic relationship. Putting in a cold climate heat pump plus a pellet stove, for example, is a really nice combination. Or, cold climate heat pump plus a wood stove, just to take the edge off of the cold climate heat pump on those very cold days that we inevitably get. Or just going fully automated wood heat if you don't want to worry about anything, because ultimately a pellet stove and a heat pump are both space heaters. So, and it is some nice peace of mind to have that fully central heating system as well. If anyone has particular questions about their individual house, I love that, and I'm very happy to answer them.
Thanks, Emma. This is Dwight.
Yeah.
You answered, I guess, my question wasn't vocalized, but I just installed a cold climate heat pump here in Burlington last March, just as we were shutting down. And so this is my first fall of experimenting with it. And right now my house is being heated by wood chips from the Burlington electric plant. And so that electricity is in fact now heating my house. But I worry about, even though in Burlington, I don't mean to rub it in for folks in the valley, but we have pretty reliable electric service here. But I do worry about another ice storm or something, and the house freezing and all my pipes freezing and so on. So it's something to add is that it's a good emergency backup for a loss of power. And I think a lot of Vermonters look to that too. So my 2 cents.
That's true. That's definitely a selling point for wood stoves, is they quite simply always work.
Right. As long as we have oxygen.
Yeah.
I do that too, heat with a cold climate heat pump, and I have a fireplace, wood burning fireplace insert.
Perfect. It's a money combo.
Any other questions? Brad, you've just popped on. I wonder if you have a question. Brad, if you were talking, it looks like you might have been muted there, so we didn't quite hear you.
Sorry, I didn't have anything to say. I'm sorry.
Got it. Sorry for putting you on the spot there.
No, it's okay.
Any other questions for anyone? Oh, we got something here.
I have a question. I was wondering if the pellet boiler systems could work with existing forced air heating systems.
Yes. So there is, I always just say boiler because more folks in our area have boilers than hot air furnaces. But there is such a thing as a pellet furnace as well. And good news, that's less expensive than the boiler. Yeah, it's like a few grand cheaper because it's just simpler to heat air than it is to heat water. Right now, only one company makes one that's available in the States, and that is Maine Energy Systems. So they only make, so there's the one, it's a great, so no complaints there. You have another option, which is you can adapt any boiler to be a hot air furnace by running it through a hot air or a heat exchanger. And that will cost more money than just having bought the furnace, with the upside being that you can also run your domestic hot water off of it. For most folks, it ends up working out that just doing the pellet furnace, and then maybe you add like a heat pump hot water heater for your domestic hot water ends up being the most sensible and cost-effective solution. But you do have both options.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Emma, I have one final ending sort of question here. If there's one thing that those of us who heat with wood can take away from today and can do over the next, year or so, just put it on our priority list, our never-ending to-do list, what would you say that one thing is?
Those of us that already heat with wood?
Yes.
Well, that's hard. Give yourself a gold star. Spread the good word. Get your chimney swept. Next year, buy 2 years worth of cordwood at once so you can get on a good cycle where you always have a full year to dry your wood, and you can buy green, which is the cheapest, and still have it be fully dry by it gets around time to be the next year. That's very proactive. Do that.
Great. Just bring the COVID mentality forward.
Exactly.
All right, we have time
If
for
anyone
one more
else thinks of
question.
any follow-up questions, or if there's anything you were a little shy to ask in front of everyone, feel free to email me at emma.hansen@vermont.gov. Or ask me on
Thank you very
Huron's.
much. Well, great. Thank you very much, Emma. I think I don't want to keep holding people here, possibly against their will. So I think we're going to wind it down. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but I will leave this open for a few minutes if people have any questions they don't want to ask in a recorded session. But anyway, thank you all very much for attending tonight. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Emma, for your presentation. So really looking forward to hoping that this was useful to you. So thank you all very much.